Good morning. Today is the 24th day of the first Adar, the 4th of March. And we're going to be looking at the second reading of Vayak'hel. Vayak'hel in general is, in a certain sense, a restatement of everything that we learned about the tabernacle and how it should be built, except this time it's actually built. And it begins, what we missed yesterday was a reading about the importance of keeping Shabbat even when building the tabernacle, and then a quick recap of the of all the vessels that would go into the tabernacle. And today, what we'll see is two things. The first thing is the second reading begins by saying, "Everyone whose heart uplifted him came forward, and everyone of generous spirit brought a contribution for God." We're looking at Exodus 35:21. What did they come forward for? What was their generosity for? For the labor of the tent of meeting. Tent of meeting is how the tabernacle is sometimes called in Hebrew, and because it's the meeting place where Moses meets God, and for all its service, meaning for all the different vessels of service and the sacrifices, and for the sacred garments that would be worn by Aaron and his children. This idea of having a generous spirit, it's called a nadiv lev, a person who has a generous heart, actually. So here they translate it as spirit. But it's important to know that, first of all, there's a generous spirit. And then a few verses later, we hear in verse 25, "Every wise-hearted woman spun by hand, and they then brought the spun yarn of turquoise, purple, and scarlet and linen." The giving heart, or the heart that has generosity, becomes the heart of wisdom. And this is a very important lesson. Usually we tend to think of things as wisdom is not related to one's character. We tend to think that our intellectual side is completely disconnected. Of course, Torah has a big problem with that. It doesn't believe that. It believes that there's a very strong connection between the two of them, but especially in what we're going to look at today, because we're not just looking at wisdom in the sense of pure intellectual wisdom. Rather, we're looking at applied wisdom. The application of wisdom is what we call artisanship or craftsmanship. It's the ability to take our wisdom and apply it and actually use it. Not all wisdom that people have, they can be very, very wise people with a great deal of insight intellectually, but with no means of applying it in their lives. All the more so, there can be a lot of intellectual knowledge about mathematics, for instance, but no engineering skills, no ability to actually take that knowledge, the mathematical knowledge, and turn it into something applied. So generosity of spirit is actually what creates the vessel in the heart so that the wisdom can become something that's applied. And we'll see in a moment what that means. It's not just having a practical side. It's not just knowing how to hack things. It's something far beyond that. It's understanding what the wisdom will look like in the real world. It's a very important thing to know that not everything that seems even deep and revelatory in the intellect will seem that way when you try to apply it in reality. There are things that are very, very advanced and show us the really powerful intellect of a person. But when it comes to actually applying them, that person might not know at all how to do it. And the result is actually worse than if you wouldn't have tried anything in the first place. So one area of that, for instance, is that someone can know very well what he wants in terms of the mind. For instance, I can imagine a certain drawing, a certain scene that I would like to paint. But even if I have some skill at painting, if I don't have the wisdom of the heart, I won't know how to actually make it into a masterpiece. It might be an interesting scene, but it won't become a masterpiece. Something will be missing. And the whole thing about the tabernacle is that the tabernacle is not just an example of artistry. It has to be something that inspires. It has to be the beauty, the artwork, the craftsmanship in the tabernacle has to be something that inspires people to a higher place. And to be able to do that requires a lot more than just having knowledge. It requires generosity of spirit. The generosity of spirit is the way that we affect others. And so when there's a generosity of spirit, the wisdom above can come down and become something that moves other people and gives them. It doesn't just elevate them, it inspires them. It doesn't just take them to a higher place because they're inspired by because they're elevated by the art, but they're inspired by it. They feel that they've received something. And that's the real secret of the tabernacle, because the tabernacle is meant to give us a connection. Like we said, the tent of meeting, it's meant to give us a connection with godliness. So this type of wisdom is actually called feminine wisdom. It's not even called, and that's why it begins with the women. It says, I'll just read it in 22. It says, "Vayavo anashim al anashim," the men accompanied the women. It's a very interesting statement that the men accompanied the women. All those who were generous of heart brought bracelets, nose rings, and so on. And then in 25, every wise-hearted woman spun by hand, and they then brought the spun yarn of turquoise, purple, and scarlet, and linen. And then it says in 26, all the women whose hearts inspired them with skill, it says here with skill, but it's really, again, with wisdom, spun the goat hair directly off the living animals onto threads that required special skill. So we see there's a lot of wisdom here, but the wisdom is being applied in a way that it becomes something that changes reality and causes it to inspire us. So let's see a small example of this. A little bit earlier, right, in verse 10, it says, before it starts with the whole process of telling us the women and the men came, just in general, it says in verse 10, every wise-hearted person shall come forth and make all that God has commanded. And there it's talking in general, not talking about necessarily about men or women. It's just saying anybody who has a wise heart. Now, if we just look at this phrase, Chacham lev bachem, wise-hearted amongst you. Chacham lev is, Chacham is wise, it's equal to 68. And lev, heart, or hearted in this case, wise-hearted, is 32. So altogether we have 100. So that's a very beautiful, perfect square. But what we're going to look at is something that we haven't really done yet. And this is the basis of when art begins to inspire. It's called the golden ratio. The golden ratio says that there's a certain ratio between things, that when that ratio is protected, conserved, is used, then we feel inspired. We feel that something higher has come down. And the ratio is governed by a number called phi, and it's equal to 0.618 or 1.618. There's two different options for this number because it doesn't really matter. It's just the number either plus or minus 1. And the ratio between any, if you take what is the golden ratio, what is the golden section, the way to divide 100 in the way that it will inspire the most, so you do 100 times 0.618, and you'll get that the closest integer is obviously 62. And then the other part will be 100 minus 62, or 38. How do we get it out of this phrase, Chacham lev, wise-hearted? It's the initials. The initials are Chet and Lamed. Chet and Lamed are 38. That's the smaller section. And the rest of the letters equals 62, which is then the rest of the letters 62 and 38, they equal 100. That's the golden section in this phrase, wise-hearted. It's saying that the wise heart, the heart that knows how to use craftsmanship, artistry, in such a way that it inspires, is a heart that is based on at least one of these principles called the golden section. It's something that you need to know how to use. But then if we continue just a little bit further, it's a beautiful thing here. The next word, Bachem, is also equal, amongst you, is equal to 62 also. So we have 38, 62, 62. What this means is that if we do an additive series, I'm sorry for all the mathematics without the clear introduction, an additive series just means like Fibonacci numbers. Fibonacci numbers are a golden section type of number of series. So if you start 1, 1, the next number will be 2, because it's just the addition of the last two numbers. 1 and 1 equals 2. Then 1 and 2 equals 3. 2 and 3 equals 5. 3 and 5 equals 8. 5 and 8 equals 13, and so on. But you don't have to start from 1, 1. You can start from any two numbers. So in this case, we would start from 6 and 4, in that order. So 6 and 4 is 10. You could actually do 4 and 6, also. That'll also work. 6 and 4 is 10, 4 and 10 is 14, 10 and 14 is 24, 24 and 38 is 62. And we have here our 38 and 62. 38 plus 62 we already know is equal to 100. And then if we add the previous two numbers, 62 and 100, we'll get 162, which is the value of this entire phrase, every wise-hearted amongst you. Kol chacham lev bachem. Chacham lev bachem is equal to 162. So this is a very nice example to begin to understand the whole concept of golden section, that it's the type of wisdom that comes down into the world, not just to show intellectual prowess, but to actually be something that can inspire the world. And about this, Rav Ginsburg usually teaches the verse spoken regarding the children of Noah, that Yaft Elokim leyefet v'yishkon ba'alei Shem, that God should beautify Japheth, and he should dwell in the tents of Shem. And the idea is that the Greeks, who are the descendants of Japheth, they were the ones who discovered this beauty. They discovered this divine proportion. It's even sometimes called a divine proportion, not just a golden ratio. And it's most beautiful when it serves in the tents of Shem. And the tents of Shem here is obviously first and foremost the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, and after that the temple in Jerusalem. What this is all saying is that the true Jewish artistry and craftsmanship is saved or relegated specifically for the construction of the tabernacle, for the construction of the temple. That's where our true ability as artists come out, and the true abilities of the entire world. And that's what causes a building like this, like the tabernacle or the temple, to be something that inspires us all. Thanks for joining today.